Welcome to another episode of Solo Scaled. This podcast is brought to you by the AI Driven Marketer, and I am your host, Ken Freire. And today I am here with Jake Doberens. He has his own podcast production studio. So we're competition, Jake. No, I'm just kidding. We're not competition. I'm excited to hear from your story, man, and just like how you've grown it, because you've had business. It's gone up and down. It's been great, but would love to hear what you're doing these days, man. So before we dig into the actual business, just kind of walk us through the origin, like what made you decide to start a podcast production company?
Yeah, I think like most people, it just started out of extreme boredom. Well, I don't know if that's most people, but because I discovered podcasts. You have to go back to the beginning of when did I discover podcasts, and podcasting reached a moment in our culture almost mainstream. You have TV shows like Only Murders in the Building that feature podcasters, so it's kind of like having a moment, right? But back when I was in college, I just had the most boring job in the entire universe. I was a university archives guy, and that involved me sorting papers, like in from like newspaper clippings from the 1990s. The basketball team did this, so put it in the right. This is the 1998 folder for what the basketball team did. Just boring stuff. Losing my mind, but
I'm slowly dying.
um, yeah, I started listening to podcasts. I'm up in this climate controlled room, no windows, just me. And, I don't know if I don't think ghosts are real, but like this is the place where they would hang out. Like just this is archives. And so I started listening to podcasts to keep me sane. And I started getting hooked on podcasts. And the podcasts I listened to were all entrepreneurial stuff. They're all about growing your business and online business and all the different millions of ways you can make money, from sketchy to less sketchy kind of ways. Like this was 10 years ago. Some of the advice probably not great, but that's what I was getting in my ears. Podcast, that's cool. Podcasts are cool. This is interesting. This is a great way to absorb information while I'm doing the most mundane task you can ever imagine. And so, I suppose it was destiny that like one day I was going to create my own podcast. And I did. I did it in 2020 for my first podcast. I always let people know I was doing it before it was cool, because everybody and their mom and their dog started a podcast in 2020. I did it just before all the lockdown stuff, like just right before all of that. I was planning this for months. I was doing all of that. So yeah, it got lumped in with the of everybody else doing it, but
Yeah.
technically I was before them. And so we got got me doing a podcast, where I'm absorbing other people's information, but of course, learning and failing a bajillion times myself, and realizing that it's not. This applies to all areas of business, right? It's not build it and they will come. Turns out crazy. Like you have to like do work to make it something people want to listen to make it found in the World Wide Web, like all this stuff. So failing doing that. And that's actually when I started this company. When I started my company, Theophany Media, at the time, podcast was one of the many things I wanted to do because I like doing all the things. So we were going to publish books and, get into all these other different spaces. And I just wanted to have a home for all my creative endeavors. And podcasting was just one of those endeavors. My background is in biblical studies and theology. So a lot of that were kind of more of that religious, Christian, adjacent, kind of in that sphere, in that space. So I had a podcast, then I started another podcast before long, and the first one eventually died. And the second one, I eventually sold that off to another company. And then I started a third podcast and started really realizing that, like, of all the different creative endeavors in the world, podcasting is pretty cool, pretty fun. There's a lot of advantages. Doesn't mean it's easy, but there's some really unique advantages to the podcasting space that I'm like, I can't quite get the same can't quite get the same buzz, but also can't get the quite same benefits from like going all in on whatever channel. And and Ken, to be honest, I'm not dancing on TikTok. I'm just not going to do that. So, it's me on podcasts instead. Like that's my outlet to have influence, to get a message out to people and things of that nature.
What's so funny, Jake, is that I'm very similar. I was like, I do not want to do TikTok dances. That's why I started podcasting probably in 2019 or somewhere around there
Mm-hmm.
for the university I work for. And then afterwards, I started podcasting for different things. And then I think this is my fourth or fifth podcast. But I'm curious,
There you go.
people are listening to this, and we're both podcast production company. We coach people on creating podcasts. You help them and manage it and stuff like that. We're always trying to convince people to start a podcast. And you said something very interesting earlier. You're like, hey, there are so many benefits to it. I want to talk about the benefits and the cons and how have you mitigated the cons. But let's talk about the benefits first.
Yeah.
What are the benefits that you have found to podcasting?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the biggest benefits of podcasting is the barrier of entry is low. It's relatively easy to get going, to get out there. There's a lot of things in the world that have various artificial or natural kind of barriers to it. If you and I were like, we want to go make a big budget Hollywood movie, well, we're going to run into some roadblocks there. That's not easy. Yeah, we could go get a couple camcorders and run out and run a gun and shoot our own film, but like there's a lot of barriers to making a movie or to doing a TV show or in some cases to writing a book, although that's another area where the barriers have gone down a lot. But podcasting, like, the very, very basic version of it is find a software that can record and then record you saying something and then you put it out in the world. The podcast players are free. The apps don't have the same kind of algorithms that, Twitter or your Instagram will have that kind of show some stuff and hide some others. Like podcast apps are a little more democratic in that way. You're not paying them anything. There's that lower barrier of entry. And so like anybody can do it. And if you work hard, like, yeah, it's kind of that nice, there's a lot of success stories of, people can make it big or people can, whatever their goal actually is with the show. That's doable. That's possible. I don't recommend people, I don't think you do either, of just press record and just start blabbing. But technically, you could start there. The old joke about, oh, it's the guy who has a podcast in his mom's basement or something. Like, yeah, okay, I guess you could do that. You probably shouldn't, but you could. And so it's one of the really nice benefits, just that it's just easy to get into. And the second one I'll highlight is the word that I just find myself using constantly, and that's authenticity. I believe we are in the age of authenticity, where more than ever, we want to see people that are human and relatable and flawed, who have personalities. We like to buy from, companies and businesses, and we like to donate to organizations that are personable, that are relatable. And so podcasting allows us a space to be people, to have just conversations here. The next words I'm saying, I didn't script. I don't think you scripted a lot of this. Like we're raw here. We're just talking about stuff. And that's really cool about podcasts because as I often say, like we all kind of think that our favorite podcast hosts are our friends. That parasocial relationship kind of thing, because we know things about their life. The guys or girls that are in our ears all the time, we probably know, maybe we know their wife's name. We know how many kids they have. We know their favorite things, or they went on that trip to Italy last year. Like we start thinking they're our friends. We don't know them from Adam, but we build a relationship with them. And, if so-and-so runs the AI marketing show and I'm like, I need some help in this area, I think of the person who I know and I like and I trust. And so podcasting is great for building that authenticity. You can do that on social media and stuff. There's other platforms you can do that. Not the only place in town to be authentic, but it's just a really nice one. And I do polish my episodes. I want them to sound good, but at the same time, I want them to know I'm a human being, and I make mistakes sometimes. I say I stumble over my words. I ramble on like I'm doing right now. Hey, I'm just like you. Like, I'm a normal person who I happen to know some things about some topics, but we're not too different. And
Yeah.
podcasts are really good about creating that environment.
Yeah. And that's what I have found to be so great, where most people are always trying to do like red ocean strategies, like Instagram, like for
Uh-huh.
example, they're like, hey, let's pursue Instagram and try to grow our Instagram. Man, Instagram is so hard to grow. Where it's like for podcasting, man, if you get to like 10, 20 episodes, you're technically like in the top 10% of podcasts at that point, because most people have
Exactly.
quit by then.
100%.
So it's a lot of fun to do it. And I love how you talked about the age of authenticity. Not to do a shameless plug, but my business partner and I just wrote a book called Own the Show. It's all about becoming an authentic authority in the age of AI.
Beautiful.
And the whole book is like a pitch for podcasting and how we use AI with podcasting.
Mhm.
Um, but Jake, I'm curious. We always talk about the benefits of podcasting, but there's also cons, right? Like we can't act like there's not cons to podcasting. What have you found to be the cons, and how have you mitigated those cons?
Yeah, well, you touched on it briefly. There is opportunity in the podcasting space, but we also have podcast apps littered with bad and dead podcasts. Like, there's a lot of not great stuff out there. And as much as that gives us an opportunity, that also means like we got to be careful with not just becoming another a part of the podcast graveyard of the ones that didn't make it to 10 episodes, the podcast that is perpetually stuck at 21 downloads, and one of those is probably your mom. There is unfortunately a lot of bad podcasts in the world. It is something about 50% of podcasts don't get more than about 30 listens per episode in the first
Yeah.
7 days, which means I have a top 25% show in the world, and people are like, wow, that's so impressive. And I say, I mean, yeah, kind of, but also it means there's so many other people that are really, really bad, because I don't have any kind of Netflix deals, or Spotify hasn't picked me up. I'm not the biggest show in town. I just happen to be better than the people who don't treat it like a business, who just treat it like a hobby, who just do it for funs or kicks and giggles. Yeah. So the con here is we got to be careful, because a lot of bad stuff, and there is sometimes a reputation of podcast being junk because people have heard junk. And as more people enter the space, guess what? The expectations for the quality is going to increase. We're not going to accept you using your computer, laptop, microphone. We're going to want you to have some kind of structure. I don't know. There's a lot of podcasts that used to be just two guys talking, and I'm not saying those aren't popular anymore, but we're also like, okay, but what's the point of this episode? There are plenty of opportunities again, but also we have a lot of competition. And a recent study I read a couple months ago said, like, the average Americans that listen to podcasts pretty much only pay attention to like three main podcasts a week. They have
Hmm.
their three main ones, and those are their go-to ones. So, like, guys, it's kind of hard to creep into that slot. Even, let's just say, let's make somebody's top 5 podcast. You got to fight hard for that. You got to
Yeah.
tell people you're worth it to get there. And what's going to make you stand out against this comedian's podcast, or these two reality TV stars that are talking about their dating life? Like, what makes yours the indispensable podcast? We got to be careful there, because it is hard, and yes, there's less podcasts than there are YouTube videos or music or something like that. So in that sense, the space is less crowded. People don't have necessarily the same bandwidth to listen to all the podcasts. Like I said, three seems to be that kind of average. And then there are people like me that, you know, I mean, when I have my most free time, I'm probably kind of going to 10 different shows a week or something like that. And then the busy weeks, it probably is like, what are my three shows that I have to listen to their episodes? And then other
Yeah.
shows, I'm like, I don't have to listen to this one. So,
Yeah. My wife and I joke around that whenever I'm remodeling a house, there's several books that I go through, and then that's when I catch up to all my podcasts. But you're right. Most
yeah,
people only
yeah.
have like 3 to 5 that they rotate through, and you got to kind of become that top 5 person. So I'm curious, what strategies do you use? Because you got clients that you have. What are strategies that you do to get people to that, like, hey, I'm going to be in the top 5 of podcasts for someone to listen to?
Well, so one thing I probably should have said a little more clearly earlier, you've joked a couple times about being competition. I'm working mostly with nonprofits and with religious organizations. Like
Yeah.
that's mostly who I'm working with. I'm not necessarily working for everybody when it comes to podcasting. So I have podcasts. I'm working with podcasts that are in very unique spaces. They're either religious or like there's some kind of social good organization, nonprofit ministry. There's something that they're doing, and those organizations have all kinds of unique challenges. But there's a lot of applicable lessons for everybody. And the thing I preach the most probably is the riches are in the niches. And I have to pronounce it niches. Some people say niche, but then the phrase doesn't work. And so, whatever. You can get mad at me later. But the riches are in the niches. And this is something that I have struggled with so much. We've already touched on it. I want to kind of do everything in the
Yeah.
world. But the things, like when it comes to being the best podcast that somebody listens to often, uh, it's so much easier to be the best podcast in the very narrow area than it is to be the best podcast in a very broad area, right? If you are having a home improvement podcast, that's your thing. To be just the home improvement podcast, man, so much other competition. This guy over here probably has uh an HGTV contract, and so they have all this money to pour into it. You can't beat them. But if you're the best home improvement show in Oklahoma or for renters or whatever it is, like narrow that down, add a modifier there. I think we can suddenly become the go-to person for that. There's a lot of people that I do a lot of networking and things, and if somebody says I need a plumber. Like my mind probably kind of blanks. Like, I think I know some plumbers. Like, let me think about that. But if they're, um, I don't know, the plumber was a bad example. But like, if they need a plumber for, their apartment complex or something like that, then I might be. Oh, I know a person that comes to mind there. If
Yeah.
you're, if you have a couple keywords in your specialty, I just think it's easier to become the top one. Easier to get found on Apple or Spotify when somebody is searching something in the little search bar there. It's easier to be top of mind when you're the expert in your little space. And so that's hard for the clients that I work with, things like nonprofits, but it's like, are you going to be the best nonprofit in the, homeless ministry space? Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the landscape looks like, but that's probably tough. But I say, be the best homeless ministry in Oklahoma podcast or in Oklahoma City. We can go even more specific like that. I did help a nonprofit start a show that's specifically focused on Oklahoma City and some of the leadership things they're doing there. Easy peasy. And what
Yeah.
that leads to is, especially if you're doing that niche, you could have certain news organizations are more interested in covering you. Like if there is a home improvement Oklahoma magazine, I don't know, they're going to cover your podcast because it's home improvement Oklahoma. That's a story. You just got free publicity. Or the Leadership in Oklahoma City podcast. Like, okay, well, the local news channel is probably going to cover you because you're in Oklahoma City. They're not going to cover the show in Minnesota or whatever. All kinds of doors open up when you kind of narrow down. So
Yeah.
that's the big one that I preach a lot.
No, and that is huge because and sometimes people get stuck. They're like, "Well, how narrow do I go? Is there enough people?" Like, if you want it to be a business that, for example, going back to your homeless ministry one,
Yeah,
right? If you're a business that you're like, "I'm only going to work with homeless ministries in Oklahoma City," and you're like, "Well, Oklahoma City only has 3 homeless ministries." Okay, that's probably too narrow because you've
sure.
you've won the market. You've gotten all 3. The way I like to think about it is, can you get 1,000 people to listen to this podcast?
Hmm.
Is there 1,000 people that if you put a lot of work into it, you do the work, there's going to be like, yeah, I'm excited for this market that you're in. But for you, Jake, I'm curious, as you've been growing your business, right? I want to get a little bit more practical here. I've got a few more questions before we wrap up. But what's been the biggest strategy that you've used to help grow your business?
Well, I try to occasionally practice what I preach, crazy enough, and figuring out that target audience has been really beneficial to me. And it's a journey that I'm constantly on because when I shifted from making my own podcast to helping other people make their podcasts, at first I was kind of for everybody.
Yeah.
In fact, like in some cases, you just got to take where the money is. Like I had one client who he could throw around some dollar bills, and I was like, "I'll take you. Well, I can help you out. You have the money, I can help you out," and I did. And then over time, I realized though, like again, it kind of comes back to that networking example. Yes, there isn't a lot of podcast production agencies that most people can name. Most people can't come up with that. So maybe I would be top of mind for it. But it helps you stick out more when I am the blank business for blank people so that they can blank. Like once you
Yeah.
start filling in that, I've heard it called different things. I kind of refer to it as your XYZ sentence. I'm doing this for this so that this. Once I started filling that out, I think that really made a big difference for me. So I started realizing one, my name, Theophany Media, the name of my company, is already kind of a religious term. Theophany means the appearance of God in the world, like a burning bush or a cloud in the sky. That's a theophany, a little academic term for you. And so I was already interested in specifically working with religious clients, and I wanted to work with clients that were doing some good in the world. And then I realized very quickly they have unique problems because a software company that comes to me and says, "Oh, we want to make a podcast." And the goal of the podcast is so that people will buy our software. Like we have, that's a very like, okay, I can help you design a podcast that get people interested in your product. There's some steps there that make sense. But then you have a nonprofit, and it's like, but the goal of this is, yeah, I want people to give money. I want people to know our story. I want them to share. It starts getting a little chaotic. And so there wasn't
Because they're trying
anybody.
to do so many things.
They're trying to do so many things for good reason. I hesitated to go into the nonprofit market because, nonprofit, I was afraid I was going to be non-profitable. And that's still a little bit of a concern here and there. But there are unique challenges that they face. So you know what? They're going to want to work with the person that understands their unique challenges. I have ran a nonprofit. I've worked as director of operations and marketing for a nonprofit. I've worked for churches. I've worked in and out of that space. So I know their space, and I know specifically podcasting. So like I am the person that can help them and things of that nature. And so that's helped. Before I even typed out a message, before I even did any ads or any kind of like traditional marketing, getting that clear was really important for me. And then the next strategy that's worked has, honest to goodness, just been LinkedIn. That is the platform where I've been able to create connections and community and slide into people's DMs. Like I don't know, it's different. Like if I sent a Facebook message to, some CEO or whatever who I really wanted to get a business from or really wanted to connect with, they're not going to say yes. But on LinkedIn, I'm like, I am talking to some pretty successful people. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say yes. And there's a large podcasting organization, and I saw the founder. He was in Oklahoma City, where I'm from. That's why I mentioned Oklahoma several times. And I just DM'd him and said, "Can we get coffee?" "Yeah, let's go." And cool things can happen just from that networking. So, huge fan of networking. I do like in-person networking, to be clear, but LinkedIn's really fun. And
Yeah.
that leads to some of the in-person networking. Like I said, coffee, and then somebody and you recommend, and blah blah blah, and business happens.
How do you this is the last question, and then we'll wrap up to the Fast Five that I talked to you about beforehand. But with LinkedIn, I know a lot of people hate when people slide into the DMs because it can be so generic, right? Where it's like, hey, want
Yeah.
to just grab coffee, or hey, want to connect, or hey, can I pitch you my services? What have you found that works best for you?
I have found to not slide into the DMs cold most of the time. I cannot say I always do that, but without building some relationship, without anything, I always thank people for connections. Though LinkedIn
Yeah.
has an algorithm, from what I understand, if you have messaged each other in your DMs, LinkedIn assumes you like this person, you know them, so they're going to push your content in front of them more often. So I still say thanks for connecting or whatever, but I don't ask anything. I don't do anything. But my favorite method is probably me bringing them value for free without having to sell them or pitch them anything. And so I'll say, what I'm doing right now is I'm developing a podcast that will feature Oklahoma City area nonprofit leaders. So what I'm saying is I want to talk to you about getting you on that podcast. I'm not selling them a thing. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about how I can help them. And it's going to come up of what I do. And maybe the organization says, "Yeah, we want a podcast." But I am first and foremost sending them value. Or I say, "Hey, I know somebody that needs help with this or that," or "I saw somebody looking for a job in this." I am sending them value. I'm sending them something that starts a conversation, as I'm not a sleazy salesman. Value first, and then comes the sales pitch later. That's what I find works.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, Jake, as we wrap up our conversation here, I definitely want to do the Fast Five. Like I mentioned, and I mention all the time, is I'm working on a trend report, talking to as many faith-based entrepreneurs for 2026, and just asking them like, hey, what are you doing that's working, and what are you doing that's not working? So here are the Fast Five questions, super quick. I'm not gonna give any feedback. But question number one is, what's something in your business you're experimenting with right now?
I'm experimenting with how much I should invest in video.
Ooh, okay. Right now, all your podcasts are audio or video?
My podcasts are audio and video, but I'm talking more on the marketing side of things. Should I leave my LinkedIn posts? They're mostly text. Should I show up on video more? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out where that fits into things.
Yeah, cool. Question number two: which part of your business feels the most influx, or like you're like, this is the weakest part of my business right now?
Though my business has shaped out, is I have a lot of seasonality to things with my clients.
Yeah,
People will contract me for a 6-episode arc and then they're done, or something like that. And so what's constantly in flux is the income, because there's not as many people willing to do really long-term projects, contracts, that I'm finding in my particular business. And so a lot of influx is just that, who knows how I'll get paid this month? Well, not exactly like that, but just that having to constantly get new clients and things of that nature in order to make the bills.
yeah. Um, okay. Question number three: what's a goal you're building toward this year that you're really excited about?
Yeah, well, I mentioned all my personal podcasts have been more what I would call personal projects, but now I am building a podcast that will directly lead to clients for my podcasting business. So that is a something I'm building that's going to be really exciting. I'm going to focus again on nonprofits in Oklahoma City, very narrow, uh, but I'm going to get some leaders on there. We're going to tell some stories. We're going to talk to them. And at the end of the day, I'm going to know all the nonprofit leaders, my target audience. I'm going to know all of them in Oklahoma City, pretty much, or know somebody that knows somebody. And then I will be top of mind for everybody when it comes to podcasting. That's the hope. That's the plan. So stay tuned.
Sweet. Love it, man. When you look at the podcasting industry, what do you see industry shifting, or where do you see the industry shifting, and how are you preparing for it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Speaking of video, I think the industry is shifting towards more and more video. I actually don't know if the actual listeners want that. Even though about 50% listen on a podcast app and 50% listen on YouTube, all the stats I've seen about the people that are watching on YouTube, most of them have it in the background and are not looking into your eyeballs. And so it kind of ends up being about 25% of people on YouTube, or sorry, 50% of people on YouTube listen and 50% actually watch and care about the video. All that to say, though, is the industry is going to expect more video, and I think maybe people will want more video. Spotify is doing video in their app and all of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to the industry, I think it's going to be tough to remain an audio-only show and get any kind of real traction, because the players are going to start to not be as friendly to that, is my guess. Spotify already is a little bit nicer to those that have video, is what I have seen.
I agree. All right. Last question. What type of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I am literally in the business of telling good transformative stories. That is ultimately the podcast that I help create. And I would just like more transformative stories that uplift people and change people's lives and show that there is some good in the world. Like, yeah, there's some not great in the world. There's also a lot of great good in the world. There's a lot of cool things happening, sometimes behind the scenes. Sometimes we ignore because something terrible happens in the news. But I would like my legacy to be, yeah, there's good happening in the world. These stories, if you hear them, they can change your life for the better.
Jake, thank you so much, man, for being on the pod. If people are interested in connecting with you, either learning from you or working with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, man, LinkedIn. It's fun. Dip your toes in it. I think it's fun. I've already started off 2026 getting too addicted to LinkedIn, which is terrible for me, and I'm going to try not to be addicted. But I'm on LinkedIn at Jake Dobrins, as well as Theophany Media. That's really the best way. We have, website theophanymedia.com. But if you want to talk to me, go to LinkedIn and let's chat. And then if you're in Oklahoma or Oklahoma City, we can chat in real life, because that's really cool too.
Absolutely. Jake, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your authenticity. And for those of you who are listening, and if you're a nonprofit, go check them out. You guys have a great day. God bless.